Thanks, Ken. Yeah, I can help. So I can attest that Fidelity is a phenomenal company, and it is a technology company. I didn't even know that when I went there, how serious it was. So, but now I'm going to talk about my new role here at GE, and I thought I'd have a little bit of fun, if you guys don't mind, because I think we have a similar challenge at GE with respect to, so what is GE? Who are they? What do they do other than, appliances and, lend money to people? So let me just quickly pull up, oh, there it is. Oh, we got a little fun with this one. And this one.
You're got a job as a developer.
It's official. I work for GE.
What?
Yeah. Guys, I'll be writing a new language for machines, so planes, trains, even hospitals can work better. Oh!
I don't know. So you're gonna work on a train?
Not on the train, on trains.
You're not gonna develop something?
Not, I am. You know what GE is?
So I get a kick out of that because I'll be honest with you, even joining GE, I didn't know how big it was, what the opportunity would look like, and I will say it is massive. I'm learning quite a bit. 300,000 employees, 500,000 total with our contract workers across the planet. I deal with 175 plus countries depending on the day. So as you can imagine, in my space, that makes it very challenging, especially information security regulation requirements, customer needs are evolving very quickly, well outside the U.S. In comparison to where they were before. And this whole Internet of Insecure Things is very interesting, right? It's all getting connected. How securely is the question? From our view, it has to be secure. So the things we do, which I'll touch on, whether it's our aviation business, where we build those big engines, whether it's our healthcare business, where if you break your leg, you get to go into one of those fun systems that scan you, or if you hurt your head, concussion, MRI machine. It's a big deal, very big deal. And actually yesterday, GE announced we're actually establishing a company as of yesterday called GE Digital, which actually I'm now part of. So I was responsible, and I am responsible for all the information security across GE. It's about 1,500 people who do that around the globe. We have several centers in the U.S. today. We're building a couple outside the U.S. as well that do cyber intelligence, security operations, incident response, incident management for the company. So it's a big, big honkin' challenge, no doubt about it. So that's why I look so good and I'm only 23. So, with that said, had I known, I would have waited till I was number 50. Maybe there's a big surprise on the 50th talker, but I'm glad to hear everything's going well. So they give you some perspective on GE. One cool thing is I get to walk into a building on a regular basis that has Thomas Edison's desk sitting in the lobby. Pretty cool. It's an old company. But to that point, we've been around for 100 and X plus years. Everybody sees us as this big monolithic manufacturing machine. That's all changing. So no different than when I was at Northrop Grumman in the defense space. I spent 10 years of my life there. One day we woke up and we said, okay, we build aircraft carriers, we build things that fly, things that go around the planets, things that go under the ocean. They're actually loaded with software, and they're all getting interconnected. The same thing that's happening, that happened there in the defense space, so this interconnected mobile, warfare, is now happening in the commercial space, the consumer space, as we're walking through it. So we are connecting our, when your plane lands, has anybody flown in the last month or so, couple months? A plane lands, about a terabyte of data is dumped off of that engine. It's put into a big data analytics lake, data lake as we call it, where it actually is crunched and delivered information analytics are given back to the customer. So we've actually been able to save several of our customers about $1 billion in the last year with respect to how they do their travel, how their planes fly, the routes they take, et cetera. You know, there's real money in all this, and we're recognizing that by standing up GE Digital going forward. Now, with that said, there's also that big thing of additive manufacturing as part of this. I mean, do we have any people who are not computer science majors in the room? All right. Is it engineering or? All right, there we go. So you guys need to start teaming on all this, because one thing I'm learning is, you know, how we go from development and design all the way through to delivery of the product to include the apps on top of that product is just critical, and you guys are going to be the ones who change that for the future. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be doing this, but long enough to at least see the beginnings of it. I think you're all going to be the ones who really tie it all together going forward. And you know, and healthcare is one of our biggest growing businesses. So I'll touch on some of these real quickly. Let me see. So, for good or for bad, I get to operate in all these sectors: power and water. So you guys want to make sure you have clean water, right? And it's used efficiently. Oil and gas, energy management, aviation, healthcare, transportation, and yes, appliances and lighting, but appliances actually has been sold off to Electrolux. Right now, we're in the middle of that. DOJ has pushed back against us on that, but that sale is going to happen. So we'll be in the lighting business, and we're actually getting out of the financial services business. So most of that was, you know, lending so that you could buy those big engines, those big turbines, those big wind turbines, et cetera, in financing in other countries, et cetera. So that's something GE is actually getting out of right now. We're selling off all of our capital assets. We've got a lot of buyers on the table, and it's a big push. So we're going back to manufacturing and industrials, but we're overlaying this digital play on top of it. So it's really exciting times for us. And to your point, so transportation is really interesting. Does anybody know that, you know, a locomotive is not a train? Locomotive is this big honking thing we make. I'll have a picture later that pulls all those cars behind it. Anybody have any idea, like today, how far a locomotive in an average day travels? What do you guys think? Take a guess. It's about 4 miles, believe it or not. It's not very far. So one of the things that GE is working on is actually a system that will help the navigation of all those trains and locomotives around the U.S. in particular right now, but we've got contracts with a lot of countries working on that. And the same with healthcare systems. We're spending a lot of time and effort on how all that's going to be interconnected. As you can imagine, that's a big challenge for us. We're no different than Microsoft. When we hand it to you as the customer, it's secure on day one, and in day two, it's insecure. I come from a family of doctors who are the worst. No offense to any doctors, medical doctors, but they're just not good with the technology. They implement it badly, and it's insecure. And you guys can probably find that out if you probably hit some of the nice search engines out there looking for the Internet of Things that are insecure. There's a few of those out there that you can find. So, just to give you an idea, first power plant for the U.S., 100 million gallons of wastewater per day, and we're working a lot on the Smart City initiative. So in particular, the Middle East, also with Walmart. One of our customers is Walmart, another one's Target. Lord knows those are going to become wonderful sensors over time, a lot more than just illumination of the room. They'll be able to see that you stopped in an area and you were looking at, maybe diet drugs or something like that, whatever it may be, and you all of a sudden moved on, or you stayed there for some longer period of time. And they could maybe even send you a message to say, hey, that's 20% off, you might want to buy that now. And it's only good for the next 30 minutes while you're in the store. It sure would be a way to deliver a message that causes you to buy differently than you do today. Or maybe they just collect that information and use it on the back end to figure out how to configure the store appropriately over time. so that you are enticed to buy things from them. No different than the kids, you know, all the candies for your kids, you got to find this out eventually, are all right down low down there, so that, you know, when my kids were little, they just wanted to grab all that stuff off of the aisle. So smart city, smart grid. One of the things I did when I was at Northrop Grumman was after 9/11, we implemented the emergency management system, Northrop, for the city of New York. And that has come a long way. You know, it's actually a mesh grid across New York City. It's highly secure, and now it's also being used for meter readings, you know, and other services that they didn't expect at the time. This is over the past 10 years or so. So expect that most of our cities are going to be operating like that, and this isn't, you know, foreign to all of you, but whether it's your parking space or paying for the meter or reserving the spot beforehand or dealing with the weather of the roads, it's going to be quite an interesting period over the next 20 or 30 years. Like I said, locomotives, planes, and lighting, and then software. So, you know, one thing, so whether you know it or not, so about 4 years ago, GE made a big play in Silicon Valley. They stood up what was called GE Software, hired about 3,000 people from, you know, all sorts of software companies, and began developing a technology called Predix. So Predix is the idea, it's the GE store, essentially for all the app development we're going to do on top of all that iron that's out there. That's going to be sensor enabled. So it's a very big deal. It's a very big play for us. It's going to be very competitive. You know, the likes of IBM and others will be in this play. But we've got a couple-year lead, I think. We also have a lot of that critical infrastructure, you know, within our reach, within our control, and working with our customers. So we're also doing a lot of, you guys are probably hearing a lot about code development. We're doing code development on top of that Predix platform, you know, in terms of what our customers' needs are. That's a big deal. That's a big challenge from a security perspective too. Once you open up that store, you know, how are you allowed to code? How are you allowed to upload code? How are you allowed to release product? All those need some level of security scrutiny as part of it, let alone the scrutiny before you enter into that GE store. So that's something we spent a lot of time and energy on today, and will be for the foreseeable future. So, just to summarize some of the things we're focusing on. Cloud is real for us. We're not like most companies where we say, well, it's just going to happen over time. We're actually way out in front, taking some, you know, risk with respect to how we implement cloud, securely of course, but we're taking some real risks. We're working with the Amazons, the Azures, the Verizon Terramarks in particular in developing what does that cloud look like for us globally in support of the business. You know, data analytics. Big iron, big data is how we talk about it. It's going to be critical for us. I know you know you have a data science program here that's phenomenal. I'm sure everyone's going to get hired, probably in this room at some point very quickly. So that's great. Good choice. I couldn't get my son to commit to computer science, so I'm either dealing with a hedge fund manager or an engineer. So no offense to you, John, young man. But so I think it's great that you guys chose computer science. It's a great field, one that you know, from my perspective, doing this for the last 25 years has just blown out and blown up, and the opportunities are endless for you. Brilliant factories, so that's how we're doing the manufacturing. I was fortunate enough to have a week or so, a couple days this summer over at your additive engineering folks, and what they're doing is fantastic. We're doing it in spots within GE today. You know, and my son was fortunate enough to come to a summer program for high school students, and he called me day 2 to say, hey, I'm working on a GE aviation part. I thought that was pretty cool. Didn't realize that was part of it, but it's real. I mean, we're actually delivering some parts today through additive engineering in our aviation space, which is a very big deal. You know, it's a huge cost reduction. The ability to change the product on the fly, depending on the environments it's in, is a very big deal for us. And it's one we're gonna keep pushing on. If you wanna look for a really cool video on the internet, GE created a little mini engine. I don't know if you've seen that video. They did it by using additive engineering, and it's awesome. I mean, this thing's blowing a blue flame out the back. It's the real deal in a very small scale, but it was all done by additive engineering with our aviation team. So that's the future for us. ERPs you may or may not care about, but they're important. Productivity tools are something we're focusing a lot on. And then obviously the security space. Like I said, I think we have one of the largest cybersecurity teams, probably after a Lockheed Martin. We're in line with a Lockheed Martin today. That's because we're in such a critical infrastructure space. When I was an FBI agent, that's what I did. Years ago, they called it National Infrastructure Protection. So I actually was hired to do cyber crime, cyber terrorism against critical infrastructure. So dams, the water, energy, transportation, et cetera. So it's kind of fitting. I'm finishing my career at GE and dealing with a lot of the same things. And that's another area where finding talent is critical. We're all competing now. It used to be easy where I'd compete with the financial services and the defense contractors. Now everybody's building out information security capability, centers, teams, whether it's healthcare, whether it's the Googles, and the techs, the Intels, and the others. We're all competing for that talent. So kudos to all of you for your hard work. Keep it up. So I wanted to talk a little bit about predicting the future. There's one thing I spent a lot of time on. I wasn't very good at it when I started it, probably 10, 12 years ago. It's impossible for men to fly. Good prediction there. The telephone has too many shortcomings. Yeah, really good prediction there. I think there's a world market for 5 computers, and that guy's really smart. So I spent a lot of time on the innovation side of things. What's our technology portfolio look like? What does it need to look like? And the past few years, it's so rapid. It's very hard to keep up. I mean, I'm spending a lot more resources than I did the prior few years, specifically looking at startups, venture capital investments, and deep diving into technology. So it's exciting, but it's very hard to pick and choose what's going to be there in the next 18 months to 3 years. So I think as you go through your careers and I always tell my kids, look at the horizon. I mean that both personally, think about your future and what you're going to do. But in technology, I'd say keep it to a short horizon right now, 18 to 24 months as you look at these things, as you figure out what you want to do. It's a rapid pace of change. It's exciting times, but it's very hard to predict. This is some old data, but the time to 20 million users, it's probably much shorter now. But 24 days is probably more like a couple hours in some cases. Lord knows I can't get anybody to go look at my Twitter stuff. Maybe if I put something really Kardashian or something out there, I guess I'll have 20 million hits in a matter of minutes. But that's what we're dealing with. In the cybersecurity space, we actually spend some time with a group called the Internet Security Forum, where we actually break down all sorts of challenges in this space. What do they look like from an external, from an internal, from a regulatory perspective. These are a little dated, but they actually have them out to like 2020. And these are predictions, and some of them play out. I'm sure if we look here, the cloud, understanding cloud leads to an outsourced mess. I'd say that's probably true. A lot of people just moved out, never really understood what they were moving into. New technologies overwhelm. I think that's true. I see that every single day. As we say in corporate America, we love all new shiny technology. We're like a fish in the ocean. If it's shiny, it shimmers, we buy it and we try it out. So it's an interesting thing to do as you go through your careers, to think about strategy, how you prepare for strategy, how you drive things for yourself. And with respect to this is also something, mobile, social, big data, these are all big things that are happening now. Open environments, social networking, big data, mobile, no surprise for anybody. And then of course, I still have to deal with these users. Unfortunately, we can't get rid of carbon-based units today until that HR says I can't do that. That's human resources once you get into, but we're dealing with all sorts of problems with respect to just user behavior. So I'm sure you guys are probably doing some work on what that looks like as well for yourself. So that's GE in a nutshell. So just the cool factor, because I'm not really that cool, but I'm cool. But so if you go to GE, you get to walk on fire. Yeah, I really did it. They said you get kisses on your feet. It's not true, it's blisters. You get to stand in front of giant next generation engines, which could probably obliterate you in seconds if they started up. You get a bobblehead, which is, it's a scary thing to get actually if you really don't like looking at yourself too much. Get to go out to Stanford and sit in on a cyber conference with the president and a lot of your peers in industry. And then lastly, you get to play in a jazz band, and I was not very good, and these are things that GE does. We have this, has anybody seen 30 Rock? Any 30 Rock watchers? We got a few. So it's a comedy that was based probably very tightly on the way GE does its executive management style, but we have a center where they take you out and you walk on fire and you dance around and do all sorts of goofy things just to loosen up and explore who you are as a person. It's kind of neat, it's kind of fun. Definitely something different for a former FBI guy. But it's been a pretty cool ride for me. I think the other thing is I thought I'd share some of my Taylor Swift cyber guidance. I don't know if you guys are aware, but Taylor Swift, I don't know if it's really her or not, but she has her own Twitter feed for security. You'll have to check it. It's called, what is it? Securite, actually. So I think this is brilliant guidance from Taylor Swift. The one at the top's my favorite, actually. If you read it, you'll see why. It's kind of fun stuff, but I will say, all right, you guys, it's a long day, I understand. So I know we can do some questions. I got one other video because one of our good friends over here, we had a tie between the videos that we had for GE, between the one and the other. So we're going to play one other video and then we can talk a little bit, which I think you guys will probably get more value out of.
Proud of you, son. GE, manufacturer. Well, that's why I dug this out for you. It's a grandpappy salmon, and we would have wanted you to have it.
That's a lot to get. Yes, GE makes powerful machines, but I'll be writing the code that allows those machines to share information with each other. I'll be changing the way the
You
world.
can't pick it up, can you? Go ahead. You can't lift the hammer.
It's okay, though, you're gonna change the world.
So why don't we have a discussion? Why don't you guys ask me some questions, thoughts, or I can ask you questions as well. What's going through your minds? What are your thoughts? I don't want to pick on the engineer in the room, but if I have to, he sat close. What do you guys think about all this Internet of Things? Scary, cool, depends on what you do. Complicated. You got a lot of old stuff out there, stuff that's even older than I am, believe it or not. I swear to God. We make stuff on oil rigs that is, in the 30-plus year range. I am older than that, but imagine retrofitting that, sensor enabling that technology. We make big things that actually, so after you guys heard of the BP, Deep Horizon, spilled out into the Gulf. We make things that actually, they're blowout preventers. They cut off the top of that big, giant, solid pipe to make sure it's sealed and protected from that ever happening again. Kind of hard to put a sensor on that in the middle of the ocean, right? In the middle of the Gulf. So these are some of the challenges we're working on. Yes?
So when you put a sensor on one of the things or
Yeah. That's all right. I'll repeat it. How's that?
yeah,
When we put a sensor on one of those things, yes.
what is the original lifespan that you expect from that sensor to be replaced?
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, it depends. So I was touching on a little bit about the environmental conditions we're dealing with. So depending on the device, so engines, aviation engines in particular, very different when they fly from New York City to Los Angeles than flying from London to Dubai in particular, or into Afghanistan, as you can imagine. Believe it or not, sand becomes glass very quickly from the heat that's created. The damage that can occur to those sensors occurs much more rapidly. So it really depends. We've got actually several different levels of sensor. You and I had a quick discussion before. There's sort of that really old stuff that's going to have very limited capability. And we're not spending a lot of time on that, to be very honest with you, unless it's really critical to the customer needs. There's technology that's a little bit harder, and we can actually implement a sensor technology on, and then there's the ones we're just going forward on in the future, as part of our releases with our customer. And we are working with a few, partners as part of that effort. But it really depends. I mean, I can't answer that well because we have so many products. To give you some perspective, in the security space, for product security, we have tens of thousands of products that we deliver to customers. We chose about 4,000 to actually go after in the security space from a sensor enablement and from a secure delivery perspective. And even from there, we neck it down even further in how we approach it. There's that scale attacking me again, Yes?
How are you dealing with the standardization of the protocols which your devices use? What are your challenges there?
Yeah, there are big challenges. So one thing I didn't touch on was this convergence of traditional IT with OT. Does anybody do any work in that space? The differences between protocols and, your good old enterprise IT space versus OT. Very different protocols. To your point, not standardized. Some are very customized. So we actually have a team looking at that for 3 of our sectors in particular, and how we can standardize that, working with industry. We have a company called World Tech, WURLD Tech. We acquired last year that works specifically on that challenge. Like I said, I think we're solving it for oil and gas, transportation, energy management primarily today. Much more difficult in those other businesses and sectors. But yeah, you're hitting on a real challenge for us. Now with that said, from a security perspective, for me a protocol is a protocol. We just need to understand how it normally behaves. We got to understand whether we should let it go through things and connect to other things, or whether it should not. We're doing a lot of work with respect to that. I mean, I think we're seeing that, like I said, the convergence of IT and OT is very challenging. And that's one thing you all should think about, how much should you know about the operational or the OT side of things versus IT, because I think there's a lot of value. I mean, I'd say for every 10 people I have in the IT space and security, there's one for the OT side of the equation. So, and we call them unicorns at GE, so we've got a few unicorns.
So you talked about a short life of some of your sensors and protecting them, but in best cases when the sensor lives for a long time, you will eventually need to upgrade the software and patches, and so how do you see dealing with these kind of problems when you have billions of devices?
No, it's a great question. It's interesting. We had a similar discussion with General Motors team about that, right? Where they're thinking, this isn't proprietary or anything. They're thinking about how they used OnStar to deliver updates to your car. So I always joke, if we thought Microsoft was bad, wait till you can't turn your car over, in the morning because the software update crashed in the middle or something, right? Or you got to reboot your car. Now, with that said, I do have a car that just had that problem where nothing, software issue, had to crawl in the trunk, pop the battery, and got it going again. But sadly, I Googled that. No, that's a big deal. So that's where Predix comes into play. This platform where we're doing co-development with the customer on how updates will be provided or new services will be provided and communicated out. Now, with that said, I know we were talking a little bit about some of the connectivity is very challenging, right, in parts of the world. Where we have some of these wind turbines, for example. We don't normally just go out there just for fun, right? They're kind of hard places to get to, so we're looking at solutions that could be more robust, that could help. For example, right today we send people up literally a ladder on those big wind turbines. Has anybody ever seen up close how big those things are? They're really big. They're huge. When they fail, it's a really bad thing. So we're now using little drones as a buddy, essentially, to go up, take readings, and come back down. And that's something we're going to deploy more going forward. We're also looking at other wireless technology that can help facilitate that. I think that's the one thing, right? I mean, it's different than the computers in this room. We've got machinery out in the middle of the desert, out on an island, in not so great places, especially oil rigs, that are very challenging to deal with, and we need to find ways back. Yes?
Two follow-ups. So I was thinking more in terms of cost of the sensors or devices, since you talked about the example of light bulbs having some sensors. So when you want to deploy at that scale, the cost has to be
reasonable, right?
And having this capability to upgrade badge might cost something. So have you found any balance?
No, and I guess I would say, not being the business guy, although I need to know a lot about the business, they're going to have business decisions about that, right? What's the price point? What can we get the price to? What's acceptable by the customer? What's the service they're getting as a result of that upgrade? Is it worth it to them, right? Because right now, a lot of the efficiencies we're finding are exactly that. They're efficiencies for the customer that they don't have today, whether it's how they drill for oil, how they route planes and pay for jet fuel, things of that nature. So, but we're hoping to derive, just like in the consumer place, a lot more from the data as we go forward in those data lakes. No different than what Facebook and Twitter and everybody else derives from their data.
Yeah, so as I understand, all these things which come under the IoT umbrella will require a lot of testing. So how is the automated testing or a simulation done for the testing? So suppose some sensor exists, and how do we simulate the test? Is there any framework or something for that?
That's a good question. So just purely from a testing of the sensors or testing of the products, or?
Of both, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
rather than anything involving.
Yeah, well, I mean, the good thing is in these industries, it's highly regulated for the most part. Absolutely in aviation, as you can imagine. There's quality runs through everything, security's part of that. Oil and gas, the same, energy, the same, all critical infrastructures are pretty tough on the quality standards with respect to those technologies. And with that said, security's still a challenging space, right? Secure code development is probably the one that gets more challenging. For us, we've implemented a standard called Achilles that we use for software development that requires security certification of the code that goes into those things. And if you don't meet it, it doesn't get released. So that's the standard the framework we're using. That's not applicable to all of those industries yet. And we're trying to spend a lot of time in shaping those other industries to move towards a standard like Achilles or something like it.
Yeah.
Yes, so I wanted to understand, does GE have a vision for data stack for the IoT? So when we think about many big data applications, the requirements are much less complicated than the IoT. So for example, a couple of the requirements, all thrown together, you have mobility, you have the fact that you have to discover sensors that you may not know existed. So the discovery requires that sensors describe themselves using some metadata. You have different ontology. So when you think about your data stack for your data analytics, what exactly are you envisioning? Do you have one that you're working towards, or?
We do, and,
Okay.
and metadata and data tagging is what we're doing. In terms of there's embedded security that we're working on for some products that will, from a machine identity perspective, can't be, for the most part, compromised. So that we know that you're that sensor and you should be sending that data to us. So that is the approach we're taking. And I think so far it's working well. We're in the middle of that right now. That's our data lake effort. And so far it's been good. We want to make sure for the customers who want to separate their data out, we can, and we can ensure them that it's separated out and it's secure. For customers who are willing to share their data with their industry counterparts or across industries, we want to be able to facilitate that as well. But it's very much a metadata, data tagging centric framework for us today. Yeah, it's a hard challenge to solve, as you can imagine, with the amount of data we're having to deal with. Yes.
So when I talk to a lot of people, one of the major concerns that I hear about, especially from people who don't belong to computer science, is the lack of privacy that's going to come in. And with the Internet of Things, I just see that getting worse. What's your take on that? And how do you think that's going to, like you spoke about behavioral change, I think that's going to be one of the major challenges to explain to people, especially from outside computer science, about the trade-off. So how do you think GE is going to tackle that problem?
Yeah, I mean, it's specific to individuals. We're not taking data from individuals. We just decided that we don't plan that. We care about the machines themselves. Now, with that said, to that point though, could you derive something from that machine data? That's something we do think about, and that's why we're setting up this control framework in order to make sure that those who don't want to contribute will not. Those who want to keep it separate will keep it separate. I have a good privacy attorney who sits over all this, a great guy who actually came to us recently from Oracle. He was their chief privacy officer, and he's done a phenomenal job. Completely understands the space. It's the only difference is the machine data relation. So we're very sensitive to privacy concerns and balancing, security needs, risk with privacy. But it's always a challenge, especially as you go around the world. Data localization requirements are cropping up everywhere, China, Middle East, where we need to say to the customer, we're keeping it there in your region. We have to have a data center there, or we have to have a cloud solution or a provider in country. That's a lot of those privacy regulations or government restrictions are driving some of that discussion as well. And they definitely fall out from the Snowden events too. So, thank you. Great question. They're all great questions. Yes.
No. How does Z use the sensors? Is it just for reading information, or is it using for controlling the engine machinery?
Good question. Right now it's just sensing. It's a really good question because we're having those discussions as to how far, it's the rise of the bots or something, right? How far do we want to go in terms of machine-to-machine, artificial intelligence, the ability to take action? I shouldn't say that. I know we have some logic today with respect to like the wind turbines. because we had some issues in the past where the turbines were not very efficient. So now they've implemented some technology with some logic where the turbines will turn themselves, into the wind, or turn their, their blades a certain way to make themselves more efficient. That can be manual driven, but we are, in some cases, doing that. The machines are making a decision there. So, I mean, that's obviously where we're going to be headed, but we want to make sure it's Six Sigma, perfect with respect to failure rate as we go forward. And I'm not the expert in that space. I know enough to be dangerous, I think, to be honest with you. But I mean, that's definitely where we're headed. We want to make sure that logic's very strong. Great question, though. I mean, we thought about that a lot in the defense space too. Right, with drones and other types of things. How autonomous do you want that machine to be? And space too. Yes.
I'm just curious about the behavioral change part. How is that a business, and how is it impacting the world in a sense?
When you say, I'm sorry, behavioral...
The behavioral change. I didn't understand how is that a business.
Help me a little bit, I'm sorry.
Okay, you said behavioral change is a part of GE, one of the products?
Yeah.
Is it? Okay, so could you please throw some light on that? I didn't get, how is behavioral change a business, or how are you inducing behavioral change, and to whom are you inducing the behavioral change?
Okay, I'm trying to think where I said it. Does anybody recall where I actually?
The rat with the helmet. The rat with the helmet in front of a trap.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, got it. The mouse would have done it for me. So, yeah, I'm a big believer in shaping. No different than shaping traffic on a highway. Whether if you're from New Jersey, they have these funny jug handle things that make you come around. If you're from other areas, you have circles, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I'm doing. So, for example, years ago, my peers would have said, "Oh, peer-to-peer traffic bad, stop, no, shut it all down, kill those users." And I'm more of a believer of let's drive them towards the most secure solution. So that's what we're trying to do. More and more of the investment I'm making on the security side is, we call it, we created our own word, anomalytics, just for fun. But we're using analytics in the security space to not really look at the individuals, but the machines. What's their normal behavior? Profile that over time. And if we really think it's egregious and a really bad and evil thing, then we'll take action on it. But otherwise, we're going to try and drive that behavior towards places we think are the most secure, to be direct and honest, rather than trying to completely control the environment and lock it down. To give you some simple perspective, right? I mean, in the corporate world 10 years ago, using personal email was a really evil, bad thing, right? So everybody just blocked everything, but you know what everybody did. They all went home with their PCs, they all went in and they did it, and they circumvented it. So we're more conscious about what are those trends, what are the top 10 things people are doing. Let's take a look at those deeply and then try and drive people towards secure solutions as a result of that. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the way we're thinking about it a little bit differently than we were a long time ago. There's no moat, there's no high wall. Everything's pretty well interconnected, and I still joke in the FBI we caught the stupid criminals. We got to catch the people who are really doing the bad things and spend some time focused on that. Yes.
There's a lot of communities or organizations where this is a CISO question, where you can go to share threat intelligence information or incident information, both inside industry and with the government. Do you find those, are you using them, and do you find them useful to help protect everyone as a whole?
Yes, I am the fortunate recipient of being in 15 of them. So, that's good and bad, right? So, and actually I stood up 2 of them in my life. I stood up the Defense Security Information Exchange for the Department of Defense with the defense contractors, and I stood up another one for aviation. So So, yeah, I think they are helpful. I think the challenge we're now dealing with is that volume of data is so great. I mean, I spent a lot of time in financial services, ISAC too, which is one of the more mature ones. The ability to identify the needles in the haystack is getting more and more challenging because everyone is sharing now. They're not refining everything. So now they're moving towards more automated, taxi and sticks. I don't know if you've taken a look at taxi and sticks. Financial services have given taxi and sticks as two standards. And we're now part of that in sharing direct feeds into our systems. And then we can decide whether we want those systems to take action or not take action, which is where we're headed. I mean, on the security side, we can't afford to be wrong for 8 hours, 2 days, 10 days. We gotta hit these things in seconds and minutes in terms of the bad actors and what they're doing to us. So that's definitely, yeah, I'm a big believer in intel sharing. Challenges the quality, challenges the scale. Government resources are very much challenged, so I mean, if we were scoring all that data, government's too late to the game. And I'm, the former FBI guy who had to sell this stuff to corporate America. They're doing their triage on it. It's taking too long. They're sharing it too late. So industry's actually stepped up and really driving it ourselves. But great question. There are how many? I don't even know how many ISACs there are today, but there are so many. I think even the lawyers just created one. The ABA created their own ISAC. I thought that was kind of interesting. So I don't know if they'll share with anybody. They'll just share with the lawyers. So. Yes.
So other companies are working on their own versions of the Internet of Things, right? Mm-hmm. So do you plan to interface with them or maybe offer them solutions to make them more secure so that you can do that, or only collect and use data from your own devices?
Great question. One that I cannot answer. I mean, really our new Senior Vice President, Bill Rue, who's running GE Digital, could answer. Right now, we are GE Digital, and we're going to be moving out on our own, as far as I know, so unless something changes. I know the news has picked up we're competing with IBM now. We don't really look at it that way. So we're driving the need for ourselves internally and the need for our customers. So, but good question. We'll see over the next 18 months. Yes?
Is he in the business of IoT, and if not, is it going to be in the business of IoT?
How do you want to define that? I mean, I guess that's the challenge.
Since you are just sensing and you are not using it, you are not taking action, so I don't think GE is in the business of IoT. They are using it for their industrial purposes, right? On their own equipment.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
You don't sell IoT as a product, as a different product.
No, we don't sell it as a different product. No, we're going to embed it in the products that we deliver to our customers.
So do you plan to sell IoT as a different product?
Again, I'd have to defer to our Senior Vice President, Bill Rue. I don't know. I only go so far. So. Yes.
So when we talk about security, I can understand how security can be applied while you're developing code or you're safeguarding your servers and all that.
Yeah.
But once your product is out in the market, how do you maintain the security aspects of that?
Yeah. So I mean, for example, we have a security operations center. There are several that monitor those networks if the customer prefers that we do that. Where we can actually respond to events, we can triage events, identify whether something bad did or did not happen. Obviously, that's a key part for us going forward. I mean, the funny thing is, most of my customers externally are my peers. So, their CIOs are becoming the customers, and their CISOs are their advisors. So Chevron will call me and say, hey, how are we doing? How's the security of this? How are you dealing with data lake, and metadata? We're having all those same discussions. So, no, we are. And that's not going to be for all customers, right? Some customers will say, this is our data. We want to protect it. We want to route it back through our networks directly. We want to do the big data piece of this. So it's not for everybody. But we have some customers that want to be in the Predix platform, want to co-develop with us, and take advantage of it, and security is part of that today. So. one more. Yes.
I think like GE wants to connect all the devices and appliances which it makes. And how much of an effort are you making to bring a unified software to power all your devices and appliances? Or are you in collaboration with any OS maker or embedded OS maker to do that?
Can't answer that question, but thank you. It's a very, very good question. We're working on that. Great question, though. You're going to be a future business leader, I can tell. Well, thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. I wish you all the best, and thank you for your time.